I'm joined by my Democratic minority legislative colleagues. To my immediate right is Legislator Richard Whitten. To my immediate left, it's Legislator Laura Curran, Legislator Ellen Birnbaum, and Legislator Arnie Drucker. Legislator Sela Bina also supports the efforts that we're about to announce today, but she could not be here in attendance. Today is a very significant day. We are giving our Republican colleagues, which control the majority here in Nassau County, one more chance to do the right thing. Not do the right thing for Democrats, not do the right thing for the county executive, but do the right thing for the taxpayers of this county. What we're asking them to do is very simple. We have put together what we believe some of the strongest reforms that will not just root out corruption in this county, but prevent it before it even occurs. We're not talking about being able to address corruption after it occurs by stripping away pensions. We're talking about stopping corruption and adding the fiscal and oversight and transparent reforms that we need in this county. We are calling our bill a culmination of bills, the Super Reform Bill on Anti-Corruption. And I'm going to ask my colleagues to talk about many of the points that will go towards addressing every single point of corruption that we've seen in this county and across on many levels of government. That being said, one of the major components, as you all well know, we have been pushing for an independent Inspector General now for almost 2 years. We have been pushing for many of our reforms for almost 2 years. And because of the stalemate in the Republican majority, and quite frankly, the county executive, we are not seeing any reforms that prevent any of the malfeasance that has occurred in this county from ever happening again. One of those measures that we had talked about was an independent Inspector General, someone that will be able to root out corruption in this county. Unfortunately, that particular bill has sit idle in the legislature. How can you have anyone that's going to be able to be an independent, not be an independent monitor that reports to the county executive, be able to have the ability to criticize and be critical and investigate the county executive? You can't have one without the other. You have to ensure the process has transparency by allowing it to be independent. By allowing it to be independent, they could focus on investigations, they could focus on rooting out corruption, they could focus on the RFP process, the procurement process, which Legislator Curran is going to talk about. But quite frankly, we're not able to move this county forward without being able to have this very key component. So again today, I just want to announce before I hand the microphone over to Legislator Curran, that we are calling on the Republican majority one last time. We have put together what we believe is the most comprehensive reform anti-corruption bills in the history of this county. And we cannot move it forward with the Republican majority continuing to be roadblocks and obstacles on every single turn we make. There is no one that can fault these bills for not being what they claim they are. Each and every one of them would fight and root out corruption in this county. The only reason they have not reached the floor is because maybe they have something to hide. It's just that simple. It makes no sense not to bring in an independent authority, an independent Inspector General, to review this process and root out corruption. Why wouldn't you want that? Why would you want somebody that works and is hired and works at the pleasure for the county executive? This is not just good for now, this is good for future government. It ensures integrity and transparency in the process. That being said, I want to hand the podium over to Legislator Curran, who's going to talk about some of the procurement practices in the county. Laura.
Thank you, Minority Leader Abrahams. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to discuss two central provisions of this bill. The first is contracting reform, so we'll tackle that one first, which will stop the scandals and sweetheart deals of the past, putting an end to the practice of politicians using taxpayer money to fund pure self-promotion. And the second one is to stop the practice of politicians using taxpayer-funded mailings, etc., for pure self-promotion. All of us are aware that our broken contracting system has led to politicians being dragged out in handcuffs, and millions of taxpayer dollars waste on bloated contracts that go to well-connected individuals and companies. It is critical that we make serious reforms to the county procurement process so that it is fair, transparent, and guarantees that taxpayer money is being spent appropriately. The bill will do the following. First, we will require a full legislative review of all contracts larger than $1 million. Right now, all contracts, no matter what their size, are reviewed only by the Rules Committee, which means only 7 out of 19 legislators make decisions on multi-million-dollar contracts. We need to broaden our oversight and allow every county legislator the opportunity to review and question large contracts. Because think about it, you know, if it's 7 out of 19 legislators getting a say on these contracts, all of those other constituents represented by the legislators who don't get to vote don't get a say, don't get any representation on these. We will prevent vendors from trying to game the system by requiring would-be vendors to disclose all political contributions to elected officials and to political clubs and parties. We will also disclose who prepared the specifications and bids for purchase, for any purchase, and publish all of these online. It doesn't cost a lot of money, it's very easy to do. I've also talked about additional safeguards. For instance, publishing all unsolicited proposals online and making them available to the public as soon as they are received by the county. And this is important because if you remember, the Abtec-Skello scandal was the result of an unsolicited proposal. I also believe that greater competition will lead to better terms and prices for taxpayer. We'll get a better bang for our buck. So I would eliminate fees that potential bidders have to pay even to see the county solicitations. This will also help increase the MWBEs, the women and minority-owned businesses, so that they have a better shot of doing business with the county. With this comprehensive approach, I'm confident we can root out conflicts of interest in the contracting process and make sure, as I said before, that taxpayers are getting the best bang for their buck. Now, the second piece is let's turn to the reforms that we are putting forward to put an end to taxpayer-funded political mail that we've seen way too often. So right now, it is too easy for elected officials to use taxpayer money, that's your money, to fund mail and flyers that look like political campaign ads. So you get the campaign stuff that's paid for by campaign funds, but too often the government-funded mailers and flyers they look like they're for campaigns, but they're actually paid for by you. So it's long past time that we make reforms that stop this practice and ensure that government mail is used only to inform residents about important information related to the workings of government. This bill would require mailers to be informative, not free advertising. It means only using verifiable and objective information, including upcoming events, public health or safety concerns, or upcoming changes to procedures or programs. Mail should only contain the sender's name, the politician's name, once, with no pictures of the sender. This bill would also require mailers to state that they are being sent at taxpayer expense. So make it clear right on there who's paying for it. Now, this all sounds good in practice, right? But we have to be able to enforce it. So this bill authorizes fines of up to $10,000 for any public official who breaks the rules. And this is done through the Board of Ethics, right? They're responsible for upholding the rules and imposing fines where appropriate. So these are two very concrete ways that we can make our government more transparent and accountable to those who pay for it, the taxpayers. Now, I would like to turn it over to Delia DeRicci.
Thank you, Legislator Curran. What I've noticed is a number of the contracts that come down that turn out to be questionable contracts are done so through emergencies. Emergencies have a specific reason, which is something of time of the essence, obviously, for safety or for reactions to storms or other reasons, and there is a good purpose for them. However, there has to be a better system in place to handle emergencies. And that's why we're proposing the idea of having an emergency contract review panel, which will work very quickly and be on call all the time. It'll consist of different legislators, and primarily what we'll do is we'll just look to see what we normally do, which is when we have time to review a contract, we'll take the same steps rather than being handed an emergency right before the meeting or the night before, where no one really has a chance to look at it beforehand. So it will require people being available at any time, but I know we're really willing to make this effort. Again, I've seen a lot of the contracts that come through as emergency. It's something that has to be addressed. I also want to take a minute just to stress how important I believe an independent inspector general will be to fix this problem once and for all. I've been criticized with that idea of saying it's an extra layer of government. It's the same layer of government, it's just one that works. And not only that, I think there are some people right now that are in the current administration that would have been better off in their lives had they had an inspector general to look to see what conflicts there were. So we want to avoid any future problems, any future embarrassments, and protect our taxpayers' money. Thank you. Thank you. Now I get to introduce legislator Arnie Drucker.
Thank you, Legislator Richie-Whitten. You know, the one thing that is the most disturbing to Nassau County residents and troubling to the members of the Democratic caucus of the legislature has been the betrayal and erosion of the public trust that has been evidenced by the arrests and indictments of our elected leaders. This piece of legislation is multifaceted and long overdue, as my colleagues have pointed out. One of the things that this piece of legislation does is it significantly strengthens the lobbying disclosure requirements by requiring county officials to disclose under oath who attempted to influence them in awarding contracts and proposing legislation, including outside public officials. It also requires county officials to disclose to the legislature any family relationships between the vendor and a public official. The disclosure also of any vendor ties to a political party officer. This is, again, overly necessary and relevant and ensures the further transparency and prevention at the core of the corruption that has plagued this county. It also prevents conflicts of interest by restricting county officials from being involved in the awarding of contracts to vendors while at the same time discussing future employment with those vendors. So again, this legislation is so on target in all aspects, and I'm proud to stand behind it. At this time, I'd like to introduce to the podium Legislator Ellen Birnbaum. Excuse me.
Thank you.
I'm very sorry.
I'm proud to have taken the lead in proposing legislation which would limit the amount of time any acting department head could be in office, and so to speak office, because they really were not vetted properly. This would be a period of no longer than 6 months. Far too long we've had an acting county assessor. I believe it's close to 6 years now. And this individual has not even met the basic qualifications to be in this position. His name was never proposed, and he's never been in front of the full legislature for approval. I believe Nassau County deserves better. A similar situation occurred with the acting commissioner of police. We need to have people in positions as commissioners, as department heads, not as acting. That is adequate for a short period of time, and as I said, 6 months really would be a long enough period of time to propose names to the legislature and then for individuals to come forth and be vetted properly. That's how we run government, with transparency, and it would bring qualified people to the positions that were open. So this is an easy one to fix. I truly believe that we need to amend our charter so that it says no longer than 6 months could any person be in an acting commissioner, department head position. That would go along with all these anti-corruption measures that we have been proposing. So let's make Nassau County government more transparent. Let's give the residents of Nassau County a government they deserve. Thank you. And now I'd like to bring back Minority Leader Von Abrams.
Before I take questions, just to summarize, and I wanted to go over some of the bullet points that we have up on the board. Basically, if you want to prevent, deter, seek, as well as fine corrupt elected officials, we need the Republican majority to get behind this bill. Many of the concepts that my colleagues have shared with you today, most people at home are probably saying to themselves, those are no-brainers. They shouldn't be politicized. These are good efforts that every county, quite frankly, whether you're in New York City or Suffolk, should have in place. And the fact we do not have these very simple principles in place, but at the same time we have the escalating corruption on many levels of government, to me is unconscionable. So if you indulge me, I just want to walk over to this side. Laura and Delia and everybody come onto this side for a second. We just want to highlight again that what our bill does. And what our bill does is that it fights anti-corruption, and it's a super reform bill. And what exactly that it does. And we talked about the independent inspector general. We talked about revamping the procurement process. We talked about basically making sure we have the proper disclosures. Legislator Birnbaum talked about the acting commissioners and so on and so forth. The disclosures is what happened in APTEC. We have to make sure that we have the proper correspondence and the emails that information is being provided to the legislature. It talks about having an independent inspector general, reviewing the RFP process. All of these are key principles that if we do not have them, legislators cannot make the proper decisions to ensure that the process has the proper integrity, transparency, and oversight. That being said, we'll be happy to answer any questions.
I was wondering if you guys are going to answer questions, can you go back to the mic?
Of course, no problem.
Can you just tell me, how is this different from similar bills that have been put forth in the past? They haven't gone through. What are you hoping is different about this one that will push it through?
Well, basically, bills that we put forward in the past, all of them are practically all the same. I mean, there were some technical changes that we made to some components of the bill, but for the most part, all of them are pretty much the same. What we're trying to do now is, rather than file very many separate bills, we're putting everything together to put one omnibus, one super bill, which basically is inclusive of all the measures that we have proposed over the last 2 years.
We're giving the Republicans one more chance.
Yes, while at the same time, of course.
By end of session.
Yeah, giving the Republicans one more chance by the end of the session, which wraps up.
To at least have a hearing.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing too. They haven't even held. That's a good point that Legislator 3G Whitten made. They haven't even held a hearing on any of our bills, or even put them on the agenda.
Right, and I would just emphasize, these are things that we have proposed throughout the past 2 years, one by one by one, and this is bringing them all together.
Now, we disclose to our constituents that we are standing behind and we are proposing legislation that is really a bipartisan piece of legislation. And they question us and we say, well, we haven't really even had an opportunity to have a discussion about these bills at the legislature or in committee. It's embarrassing, and I think the voters and the residents of this county should be disturbed by that.
And let's not forget that thousands of our residents on both sides of the aisle, Democrats, Republicans, signed a petition supporting the office of an independent inspector general. And that petition has stalled in the county attorney's office.
I mean, just to say this again, I couldn't see why, or maybe, I couldn't see why anyone would be fighting for more oversight, more transparency, more integrity. Anything we're talking about today is not bogging down the system. It's adding basically all the information and bringing it to light. Why would you fight bringing more things to light unless you have something to hide? It doesn't make any sense. Adding an independent inspector general, adding a revamp of the disclosures, to me, that's all the information that the public deserves as taxpayers. We're just bringing it to light. My colleagues in the majority, unfortunately, don't want to bring things to light, or maybe they feel that whatever they bring to the light, they feel that there may be something that is uncovered. I can't understand for the life of me why you want to add that transparency to the process. I think it emboldens and strengthens elected officials that they're doing their jobs accurately and efficiently, and as well as with the proper integrity.
And do we have any idea how much it will cost to implement all of these measures?
I believe, as one of the things we did not talk about, but right now, the Office of Commissioner of Investigations, which operates with about $350,000 budget, we would be eliminating that office. When we eliminate that office, we would basically add the independent inspector general, which we had put in for a budget for $1,250,000. Right now, the current office doesn't have much of a staff, doesn't have any money for investigators. Our office, very similar to other independent inspector general offices across the country, would have the level of investigators as well as staff, and be independent of the legislative or executive branches.
And when you're talking about that much money, it sounds expensive, but you know, it's a 4% tax increase would cover what we have right now as far as corruption. So we're talking about millions of dollars are getting passed. So $1 million would really be money well spent.
I would also add it's a drop in the bucket in comparison to the potential corruption that exists.
Right.
The county is susceptible to hundreds of millions of dollars in procurement that goes through this county, which Legislator Curran talked about. hundreds of millions of dollars of procurement that goes through this county that is not being seen, does not have the proper oversight, does not have the proper transparency that's allowed to it. So from our standpoint, it is very important that to spend $1 million, you can prevent the Abtechs of the world, the Hardrinja Singhs of the world. Those are allegations that have been made against elected officials in this county. You can prevent it, and you can save the county much more. That's it. Thank you.